Welcome to our first music tutorial video. We're going to start teaching some fundamentals of music here, and we're going to begin with rhythm and tempo. Rhythm and tempo are where we're going to begin because they are universal for every single instrument, every single vocalist, every single everything. Drummers who maybe are only playing one drum don't really care about pitch or those relationships, but they do still need to know what their rhythm is, what their tempo is. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to define these different things. We're going to start by defining tempo. Tempo is going to be defined as the speed or the amount of time per beat. We will divide our music up into beats, and we'll have different things and ways that we'll do that, which we'll talk about more when we start talking about rhythm. But to identify how long each of those beats should be, we will have an identifying tempo marker. So our tempo can be written in a couple of ways. It would be pretty typical for you to say something like tempo, quarter note equals 120. And 120 is a designation of beats per minute. So we might write BPM, but that means beats per minute. So that means if you have 120 beats per minute and you still wear an analog watch with a ticking second hand, and you listen to those ticks, that's 60 beats per minute. If you hit 2 for every one of those ticks that happens, that's 120. And that's considered the standard for a marching tempo, which we don't do a lot of marching tempos here in our church music, but it's a good reference point to have. Rhythm, we're going to define rhythm as the relationship of what you're actually singing or playing. So the relationship between what you're playing or singing, so that's between your music and the tempo. So as we get started here, first we're going to go through some tempo stuff. So this here in front of you on the screen, and let's shift this here. What you're going to be seeing is a free metronome that I Googled, and you can Google this too. Anybody can find them. They're everywhere. I have a free metronome on my phone, and these are fantastic. And so when you see something like quarter note equals 120 in your music, you can get online and you can grab this free metronome and you can change its number to be whatever that needs to be. So hold on, let me stop this. See here, it looks like this metronome works like this. There's 120. And then I have a tempo that I can use. Okay, I'm going to stop that. So that's a way to find a tempo of 120. So I wrote on the thing here, a quarter note equals 120. So where might we find that? We might find that in our lead sheet. Okay, so most of our songs, not all of our songs, have a lead sheet available. And so here is the lead sheet that's available for God is Love. And up here we can see that God is Love has a tempo of quarter note equals 74. So if I go back to my metronome and set my speed to here 72, I want 74. This is the tempo, this is how fast God is Love goes. You don't just tolerate us, you don't have somewhere to go. So we define rhythm within that tempo, okay? So tempo, you could think of tempo as your click track, because we sing with click tracks here. Your rhythms are going to require a little more information. So next, let's talk about rhythm. Rhythm has a way that it's written. And most of us aren't thinking about the way rhythm might be written because a lot of times what we are actually looking at is not a lead sheet like what you're seeing here, but a chord chart like this one. And on this chord chart, there is no written rhythm. If you want to know the rhythm of a song and you do not have an opportunity to hear the song, the chord chart will not allow you to do that. The chord chart is really a referential chart that speaks to the relationship of chord changes within the context of the lyrics of your song. So the chord chart actually expects you to already know the rhythm, the tempo, the meter, all those different kinds of things. Now, a lot of our chord charts, we're very fortunate right here. Let me show you this. A lot of our chord charts have right here on them, at the top right of your page, the time signature. It says time 4/4. And this has to do with how rhythm is written. So it says time on our chart there 4/4. But actually, if you were looking at the lead sheet, and so here we'll come over here and pull up the lead sheet, you'll see that you have a 4 at the beginning of it. At the very beginning of your chart here, you have a 4 on top of a 4 over this what we call the staff. So it's actually written like this, 4/4. And either one of these could mean the same thing. And so what this defines is this defines the first number, the top, the numerator for those of you who like fractions, defines how many beats are in a measure. And the bottom number, which I'm going to put a box around instead of a circle, defines what kind of note value is equal to one of those beats. So if you're in a music class, they would tell you what note gets the beat. In the case of 4/4 time, that means there's 4 beats in a measure and this is the denominator for a reason. If you put the 1 on the top, a quarter note gets the beat, and a quarter note looks like this. So right over here where you see this, what I wrote out was quarter note equals 120. If I had a song that was at a quarter note equals 120, it was in 4/4 time. If we go back to our metronome and we go to 120 beats per minute, these would all be quarter notes worth of time. This is quarter note. This is quarter note. This is quarter note. Just like that. So tempo is going to be set within your song at a certain point, and rhythm is going to be about relating to that tempo. So let's talk about the relationship to that tempo. So we're going to start talking about the relationship between your rhythm and your tempo. So rhythms can be very simple, or they can be very complex, and they can be notated in a number of different ways. And it can be beneficial for you to know how to notate them because it will allow you to be able to grab something like our lead sheet for God is Love and use that to determine how to sing the song, how these different things happen. The other reason it can be beneficial to you is because learning how to notate these things also comes with a way to communicate these. There is a widely accepted way to communicate rhythms, and so you can use that to speak to your fellow musicians, instrumentalists, or vocalists, or even your audio people and tell them this is where this thing happens in the song, in the music, okay? So the first thing is we talked about our time signature already. So we have a 4/4 time signature here on this chart, and that means there's 4 beats in a measure, and a quarter note is equal to one of those beats. And I'm not going to do a full staff because we're not going to interact at all with pitch. So we're just going to do a single line to write our tempo on. All right? And so the first thing we have is we have 4 beats in a measure. That's the first thing that happens here. Music is immediately divided up into measures because otherwise you'd have thousands of beats in a song. Many of our songs have over 100 measures of music, and if each of those has 4 beats, some of them have 6 or 12 beats in them in some of our different songs that we do. You'll end up with hundreds, thousands of beats. How do you tell somebody where you are? You use measures, and so we define a measure as having this amount of beats, the amount of beats in the time signature. So in this case, 4 of them, and a quarter note gets the beat. So you divide measures with a bar line, and then you use a quarter note, which will be a single black dot with a tail. No flags. The flags indicate different divisions of your music. And so here you have your quarter notes, 3, 4, and that's all the time in a measure. And so immediately this in God is Love, we also have the tempo of quarter note, equals 74. So we know that each one of these is the speed of 74 beats per minute. And this is actually already a rhythm. The relationship between this and the tempo is 1-to-1 because each one of these is worth one of those tempo time delineations of 74 beats per minute. And so it's 74 beats per minute. If we pull up our metronome back up and we do that, we're going to grab 72, 73, 74. This tempo would be counted 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That probably seems really fundamental. There's probably a lot of people, if you've been doing music for any length of time, you're like, obviously music is divided up like that. But this is super helpful to us because what this is going to give us is ways to communicate where in the measure something is, okay? So we counted that, you heard me count that as 1, 2, 3, and 4. And anywhere that your tempo hits on is the number of whatever beat that is in the measure. So in this case, 1 through 4. Some of our measures have 6, some of our measures have 12. But in this case, this one has 4. You can subdivide those notes. You can do less than a whole beat of singing, right? We could sing in God is Love, for example. We have, let me get this right. You can sing a note for less than a quarter note worth of space. In fact, here is a measure right here. Don't just tolerate us you don't have. Most of those are shorter than a quarter note. In fact, almost none of the actual articulations of those things happen on those quarter notes. So if you can't say that happens on beat 1, on the downbeat of beat 1, how would you define that? So we need to define the rest of each of those beats. And fortunately, there are ways for us to define those. So we're going to move on next to the 8th note. And as its name, if you hate fractions, you're going to be like, stop saying as it suggests. So I won't. But if you love fractions and you know them already, you're going to be like, obviously. So just bear with me until we get to the end, please. An 8th note is equal to half of a quarter note. So in an instance where there are 4 quarter notes, we can fit in 8 eighth notes. And eighth notes can be written in a couple of ways. If you have more than one of them, side by side on a downbeat and then the upbeat, you can tie those two stems together with a singular flag that unifies them. But if you had a single eighth note all by itself, you would draw that, you'd write that as a dot, as the note itself, a black filled-in circle with a stem and a flag, and that'll give you an eighth note. And you can also tie together more than one. So if you see any of these kinds of notations in your music, you can know those are all ways to write eighth notes. It's not very common to put 4 eighth notes together. You can, it's permissible, but you probably won't see that. You'll probably only ever see them like this. And so a measure like this, you wouldn't really be writing these flags. You would have this kind of thing going on, and you wouldn't have these flags. But I just wanted you to see those different ways that you could write that out. So this, obviously, at 74 beats per minute, pull my metronome back up, at 74 beats per minute, if we got 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So we can still pretty clearly see actually our downbeats, 1, 2, 3, and 4. But the midway point in a beat, we define it as the upbeat, and when we count it, we call it the and. So if I wanted to tell you that your thing did not start on the downbeat of beat 1, I might tell you it comes in on the and of beat 1. So you can enter in on an and. In God is Love, the very first entrance in this song is not on a downbeat. It's not on beat 1, it's not on beat 2, it's not on beat 3, it's not on beat 4. It exists within beat 4. We're relating to the tempo. The tempo we have defined our time as having 4 beats in a measure, so our tempo is showing us here's where beat 4 is, tick. but you can count this here. 1, 2, 3, 4 starts here. This is a rest, so there's nothing sung there. And then the and of 4, we have the word you. So if we were going to do that, we'd have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. You don't. Okay? And so we can tell people, we can communicate to our teams, the entrance for God is love is on the and of 4. And for those of you with us who are used to the click track already, you'll know that the nice click track lady likes to tell you verse 1 or chorus or whatever, a measure in advance. So this is where the chorus would technically start, would be on that bar line. So we call that a pickup into the next piece. So she's going to tell you, verse 1 right here, verse 1, 2, 3, 4, you don't. So you need to know when that entrance is. And by being able to count that, you can actually listen to the song and you can really count out all those subdivisions and hear and identify where all those entrances happen. Okay? Now, at the front end of this song, we actually have some other notations here that go in the opposite direction of getting smaller. They get larger. So here we have 4/4 time. We have some half notes in here, okay? So this is a half note. It is an open circle with a stem, right? And 2 quarters make a half. So a half note is equivalent of 2 quarter notes. So this would be beat 1. Beat 2 happens while it's still going on, and then this one comes in on beat 3, and then beat 4 happens while it's still going on. We also have whole notes. 2 halves make a whole. So this one is beat 1, and it goes all the way through to beat 4. Now, when we're writing these kinds of things, if you were somebody who really loves homework, I'm not that guy, but maybe you're that guy, you could write in all of the extra spaces here. We would write them in parentheses. So 1, 2 is part of 1, 3, 4 is part of 3, and then here you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4. Just a way to keep your brain lined up that that's taking up all that space. All that space is still occupied, and that matters. But what we'll see here is we actually have some notes on here that have not just one flag connecting them together like we had in our eighth notes, but this one's got 2 flags. Let me show you that screen up close. So here we have this right here, don't. We have the word don't, and that note has a single flag on it. And then you have just tolerate us. So that's got some notes with 2 flags on them, some notes with 1 flag on them. We have these little lines that are connecting some of these together. And so and then over here at the end, when we get to for you to finally care, or you don't have somewhere to go, we can see that there's one with a dot on it. So all these different things are ways that we can learn our rhythms in advance. So let's talk about what these mean. So we're going to start with defining our 16th notes. Just like the 8th note, you can have 2 8th notes for every quarter note. You can have 2 16th notes for every 8th note. So here we go. We're in 4/4 time. And I had 8 8th notes. I'm going to come up with 16 16th notes. They did a lot of their music definitions for all of these things based on the 4/4 time signature, so that's why a lot of it will get taught in the 4/4 time signature. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay, so you can write 16th notes by bringing them all together and tying them together with 2 flags, just like you can tie together 2 8th notes with a single line, a single flag that connects them together. You can also write 16th notes by the stem with the flags on it as individuals. Instead of 1 flag, you do 2 flags, and that will define it as a 16th note. So no flags for quarter notes, 1 flag for 8th notes, 2 flags for 16th notes. And then here we go for these, and here we go for these, and then boom. Now, here we go again. Here's beat 1. Here's beat 2, here's beat 3, here's beat 4. We've already identified those as when our quarter notes would start, and 4 of these 16th notes would be equal to one of the quarter notes. We've already identified where the 8th notes start. We know 2 16th notes gives us 1 8th note, so we can put in our ands every other after those. There's our and. But we're now left with two additional spaces in each beat that need some way to define them. And we do have a way to define them. We define them as E and A. So if you were counting this out or writing this out and you were trying to communicate to somebody where something happened, you have the E of 1, the A of 1, the E of 2, the A of 2, the E of 3, the A of 3, the E of 4, the A of 4. And now you can tell people, well, that comes in on the E of 4. And so if we were counting that out with our metronome to find something that came in on the E of 4, let's pull our metronome back up. Let's play that. So we've got this 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a. And that E of 4 is where that entrance would occur. Okay, so we've talked about all of the notes and their values. We've done whole, half, quarter, eighth, 16th. And if you walk into a music classroom at some point, your kids are in music or something, you might see this chart on the wall. And it's giving you all those subdivisions. A whole note is 2 half notes, our 4 quarter notes, our 8 eighth notes, and it might go all the way down to 16th notes. They don't all. Similarly, we have the same thing that happens in rests. Okay? And a rest is exactly what it sounds like. It's a rest. It's a place where you don't play or make noise or sing. It's empty space. And that space still has relationship to the tempo. So if we have a tempo of 74 and we have 3 beats of rest, and so we pull up our metronome and we know we have 3 beats of rest, 3, we can know. Sing, right? We can have that. 4, sing. So we need to know what those rests are doing as well. And so similarly, we have a whole rest will look like a hole has been dug in the middle of your staff. It goes down. Whole rest breaks into 2 half rests. Half rests are the inverted whole rest where the piece that is filled in goes upwards instead of downwards. Those come into 2 quarter rests each, where quarter rests look like this. And those become 2 eighth rests each, which look like this weird funky number 7 thing. And just like we continue to add more flags as we go to 16th notes, and you can go to 32nd and 64th notes and really subdivide and hate yourself, we do the same thing with 8th rest to 16th rests, where what we have is we have 2 flags for a 16th rest. We have the same exact thing going on. Okay? All right. Now, there are 2 more pieces of our puzzle we need to know, because now we have enough information to kind of count this, to identify which beat, which part of which beat everything is in what it's taking up and when everything starts. But what we don't know is a couple of these additional symbols that we'll see here. We have some arced lines connecting pieces together, and we also have some dots attached to some of these notes. And so those matter. So the arced line connecting two notes together is called a tie. And 2 notes tied together literally means you just add their values together. So if you had an 8th note tied to a 16th note, or in this case I've tied 2 quarter notes together, it's the same exact thing as a half note. It's no different. This and a half note are the same. Those are equal to one another. There's another thing that exists. It's called a dot. A dot adds on half of the note's time value to that note. So a dotted quarter note is the same thing as a quarter note tied to an eighth note. Because an eighth note gets half the value of a quarter note. And so if you have your time signature again, we'll turn our metronome back on. 3, 4, we'll subdivide that. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4, off. 1 and 2, off. 3 and 4, off. You'd come off on the ands of the following beats because it doesn't take up 2 whole beats worth of space. It takes up a beat and a half of space. And that dot works on any note of any length. So you can have a dotted whole note that's worth 6 beats. You can have a dotted half note that's worth 3 beats. All of those things still apply, are still true. All right. Now we have all the pieces of our puzzle. Now we know what we need to know. Let's actually use this to learn a piece of our song, okay? So we're working through God is Love right now. Let's take all of this and let's put it into actual practical usage here for God is Love, okay? So here we have God is Love, and we're just going to actually write out this pickup measure and then the next 2 measures, okay? We're going to write this whole thing out so that way we can identify where every single one of our entrances, notes comes in, okay? So we have this song in 4/4. It's at quarter note equals 74 beats per minute, and then it goes like this. All right, so here we are in God is Love. We're going to start with the pickup measure. So our pickup measure looks like this. It has a half note in it that is actually tied to a rest, and that's tied to the rest because this song is, at this point of the song, denoting things like instruments and other things, and then this pitch here, this note here is actually talking about the vocals. This is called a lead sheet. A lead sheet includes the vocal line or the lead line along with chord change locations throughout the song and has that all notated and written in. It does not include every single instrument. It's not an orchestration. It's not a master score or anything like that. It is enough for us to really learn a lot about this song and about how the song goes, okay? So we have this half note that's not really us. We probably could have written it as a half rest because we're talking about the vocal line right this minute, tied to a quarter rest, which doesn't actually mean anything in real life. And then you have an eighth rest, and then you have an eighth note before your first bar line, and this is where we get the word you shows up. So we need to count this. We need to know exactly where this happens in the context of the time of this measure. So because we're not singing this note, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and erase this note, and I'm going to write in a half rest because for our purposes, there's effectively a half rest there, which will look like this. Okay, so this half rest, we're not playing. So anytime we're not playing and we're still going to write timeout, we're going to write it in parenthesis. Occupies beats 1, beat 2. This quarter rest occupies beat 3. This eighth rest occupies the first half of beat 4, and then this last note comes in on the and of 4. So we're going to go ahead and fill in all of our ands so we can really see how that's happening. And then we can find that entrance. And we'll do the same thing we've been doing. We'll listen to our metronome. 2, 3, 4. We're going to subdivide. And 2, and 3, and 4. You. 2, 3, 4. 1. You. And that's how we're going to do that. So now we've identified that this is the and of 4. We know where our entrance is. That's amazing. So let's pull up the next measure and start learning through the rest of this thing. So here we have you don't. So let's just write out the rhythm of this next measure. So this next measure looks pretty long. So here we go. We've got an eighth note tied to 2. We've got an eighth note. We've got 2 16th notes. It's not tied. Excuse me. We have another eighth note and 2 16th notes. We have another eighth note and 2 16th notes. Then we have a 16th note and a dotted eighth note, which is written like this with a dot and a little tag, little second tail for that 16th note. We also have a tie here. So that means those two things are sung as though they were one. We have a tie here, and we have a tie here. And so if you pay attention, you'll notice that that means, except for beat 1, there is no articulation on any downbeat in the first measure of this, in the first full measure of singing here. So now we're going to write out the counts. We have 1. It's an eighth note, so it's only half of a beat. So this one is going to come in on the and. This is a 16th note, so it's only a quarter of a beat. The E would have gone here, so it would have been 1 E and a. Then this would be where 2 happens, but 2, you'll notice, is tied to the So because there's no articulation on 2, I'm not going to write in the 2. Here we have another and a. Here's where 3 would happen, same thing. There's no articulation on 3, and a. Here's 4, there would be no articulation on 4. This one does not persist all the way to the and. This is only a 16th note worth of value. This comes in on the E. I'll kind of write in superscript here, the E, the 2, E, the 3, E, and the 4. Here's E and all right? So that's what we've got going on. We're in the same kind of ballpark where what we need to do is we need to have our metronome going, but now we need to subdivide not to eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and to really find this. We need to subdivide to 16 notes, 1E and a, 2E and a, 3E and a, 4E and a. So when we subdivide this into 16th notes, and a, 3E and a, 4E, 1 and a, and a, and a, E. Now, out of context of that song, that sounds really silly, right? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and a, and a, and a, E. But if I give you that whole song back, if I bring that chart back up and we start singing our lyrics over it, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, you don't just tolerate us, you don't. And that's exactly right. It's exactly how that song goes. So why would you care, right? I've given you this. I could just listen and figure it out, right? But you can. And you should listen and figure it out. Honestly, you don't always have to get out this lead sheet and write all these counts in. So what's the benefit to this? Well, the real benefit to this is actually being able to identify these exact things about your song without having to look at your lead sheet. Because you can listen to that piece of music in your car and be able to go, oh, that happened on the end of 4. I got to make sure that I remember not to come in early or late, right? Oh, that rhythm is really, we would call this a syncopated rhythm when you don't have a lot of entrances, when you have your entrances not on a downbeat. Oh, this rhythm is really syncopated. I should be careful. I need to subdivide in my head to make sure I stay right on time. So what do you do if a song is not in 4/4? Because we have other songs in other time signatures. So how do we deal with that? Well, let's talk about one of them. This is You've Already Won. If you look at the lead sheet, you see it's a 6/8 time instead of 4/4 time. And over here, here's the chord chart behind it. It also says 6/8. And so we can go back to what we learned about 4/4 and that time signature. And we can remember 6, the top number is how many beats are in a measure. So there's 6 beats in a measure. And the bottom number is what kind of note gets the beat. So that means an eighth note gets the beat for You've Already Won. That matters because we used to be counting in our metronome. Every tick of our metronome was a quarter note, and now they're all eighth notes. At this point, a full measure looks like this. Looks like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so what's the tempo? Our tempo here says an eighth note equals 152. Okay? So this 6/8 time signatures are not always written as the eighth note equals. Sometimes they're written as the dotted quarter note equals. Because a dotted quarter note is equal to 3 eighth notes. And so with that being the case, you need to be aware of what tempo that said was happening. Because if it says a dotted quarter note equals a certain tempo, then that means you're going to be, your tempo marker would go, right? So let's go ahead and get our metronome out. It says 152, so we're going to go find 152. It's right here. So this is eighth notes equaling 152, right? But if we had to do this as dotted quarter notes, it'd be 5, 6, 1, 2, right? So you just need to be aware of what exactly you're listening to in your metronome, okay? And what's actually notated. Nothing has really fundamentally changed about how we count everything, except for which note we use to denote a downbeat. So in 6/8, your eighth notes are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And your 16th notes become 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and. So now your 16th notes are going to be where your and values are, and your eighth notes are where your whole beat values are. Okay? So let's go back to, let's get into you've already won here, just really quick here. Because you've already won, in addition to being this unique time signature that's different from 4/4, also does something really interesting in that it uses a lot of dotted eighth notes to make the singing feel like it's not in 6/8, while the playing happens in 6/8. So this is another one of those reasons why it can be very important for you to learn this rhythm independently of other things, just in the context of its relationship to the tempo. Right? So the first thing you have is, this is on 6. This is on 6, there it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's peace that outlast darkness. Hope that's in the blood. Okay? That makes you have that lilting feel like it was in some sort of duple meter, when really it's in the 6/8, which is more of a triple meter, having these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 feels. Just something for you to know. Those dotted eighth notes, you would count them just like you would count anything else, right? Except you just have your different values for ones. So they've got 2 dotted eighth notes, 2 more dotted eighth notes, 1, 2, right? So you have, this is 1, and then this is and 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, and 6, and. So to count this would be 1 and 4 and. And the best way that you can get some of these different counts and subdivisions going is to internally in your head, or even externally if you're going to count it out loud verbally, you want to use your, maybe physicalize the beat. So I'm physicalizing it by just giving my 4, 5, 6. Well, I'll use my other hand to give me upbeats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1 and 1. 1 and 4 and 1. Right? And so that could help you. Another thing to do is to realize that these are all getting 3/16 notes, right? 3/16 notes worth of value, because a dotted eighth note is an eighth note plus half of its measure, half of its value, which is a 16th note. An eighth note is equal to 2 16th notes in the first place. That's 3/16 notes. You know your eighth note is getting that beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and. That's how that goes. And you can give each of those, just know that they all get 3, right? Do, do, do. I'm going a little slow. Da, 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 da. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. See how that goes? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and. Give each of those just 3 hand pats if you're physicalizing it, 3 count outs if you're counting it out loud verbally, 3 whatever that you need to do. If you've got that all internal, you want to wrap that up internal. It'll help you a lot to get things out external, physicalized, and in a way that, especially if you're a member of a team, maybe you're not leading the team, really try to make mistakes loudly, right? So that way your team leader, your person running your rehearsal, can really help you find your issue. They will help you get where you need to go. And so there's a number of exercises that you can do that I would like to recommend for you. Number one, to practice at home. And then number two, exercises that you, if you're running a rehearsal, you can do with your team, okay? So that's where we're going to go next. We're going to go to practical application of this. Practical application. Right? Because it doesn't really matter if you know all these interesting things about music if you cannot actually use them to teach people, help people, or better yourself as a musician. And whether you are a vocalist, an instrumentalist, a sound person even, I dare say you qualify as a musician. All right? So here we go. The first exercise you can do for yourself, to better yourself in your understanding of this, in your ability to identify these things quickly, is to get out a lead sheet just like this one and start writing in the counts, just like I've done here in front of you. In fact, you will find that you understand your music 10 times better if you just go down the line and write in the counts. And if you go down the line and write in the counts a number of times, let's say you write it for one song a month, what you'll find is you don't really need to write in the counts as much anymore because you'll start to just hear the counts and go, oh yeah, I could just sing that out the way that it goes, and you'll be way better off. The next thing that you can do to better yourself in this is to practice the rhythm independently of the lyric or pitch. If I go through here and I'm trying to practice this as the song, 1, 2, 3, you don't just tolerate us, you don't have somewhere to go. I know that song pretty well at this point. It's not super hard for me to do. But if I'm having any sort of difficulties and I start by isolating the individual components of my music, you'll find that, oh, I'm having a rhythm issue, I need to practice my rhythm. And so then what you'll do is you'll go down and you'll write out the counts just like this, or you'll have written out the counts to enough things that you know the counts just by listening to it, and you'll get in and practice the rhythm. One, and again, apart from the lyric and apart from the pitches. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and E. I went all the way to the end, so I know that I missed that E entrance because I said E as I hit my pen on the board for my subdivisions, right? So I should try that again. 1, 2, and 1 and E. I was still a little late. I did better. No, wait, I landed on the downbeat, didn't I? I did. I went and E. So now I'm too early. Okay, but I can hear all that now because what I've done is I'm using my pen right now as kind of a metronome, but I can get out my metronome. That may be easier. 1, 2, and 1 and E. There it is. Now I got it. Now I'm landing on it, right? So that's the second thing that you can do. You can practice the rhythm using the rhythm counts independently of the lyric or the pitch. Then when you go to bring those together, you're going to find it's way easier to finally bring them together. So that's a practical application for you. You take that home. You write those things into your charts. You practice just like that, right? Let's talk about your leading a rehearsal. How can this help you while you're leading a rehearsal? First thing it can do is for entrances, an entrance that comes in on the and of 4 or on the and of anything. Honestly, entrances on the end of 1 a lot of times happen to be way harder. 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's a harder entrance for a lot of people to get. If you just know where that is, you can have your team identify that, or you can identify that for them. Hey team, that entrance is on the and of 1. So what I want us all to do is I want us all to count the rhythm to count one and. I want us to count the subdivision, maybe not the whole rhythm. I want us to count the subdivision, and then I want us to come in on the end of one with the word that's there. Don't care if you sing the pitch right. I want you to hit that word at the right time. So let's all go, right? In this case, it's on the end of 4. So we're going to say, on the end of 4, I need you all to come in on the word you, and we're just all going to give this together. We're all going to go 1 and 2 and together, and your team's not going to want to do it, and you're going to look at them and you're going to go, it's embarrassing. We're all going to do it together, so let's do it anyways. Let's go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. You. Okay, great. Let's go again. You do that a couple of times until everybody really locks into this is the entrance. 1 and 2. You. Great. Thanks, everybody. Now that we all know where that entrance is, we can move on. And you'll find that that'll save you rehearsal time if you do that, because rather than having to run the song beyond that and start from ahead of that and try to figure that out, you've just taught people the one specific thing they needed. They needed the entrance. And now they all know the entrance. And now their neighbor knows the entrance, they know the entrance, they can lean on one another better rather than having to lean on you the whole time, which is no fun at all. The next thing that you can do is you can do a rhythmic practice similar to the one that you can do at home, where you maybe take the lyric out and the pitch out. And you can just take the pitch out. I will do this kind of a practice with both instrumentalists and vocalists, and I will have my instrumentalists sing the rhythm. And this is important because what this does for instrumentalists is it gives them a clearer definition of where the text is, where the lyric lands in what they're playing. And this is important for vocalists because that's the actual rhythm that they're singing. But what they're going to want to do, what everybody wants to do, is they want to sing the song. And when you go to sing, your brain is trying to do more than one thing. So you have to tell your brain, stop doing more than one thing, and let your team, and really demand of your team that they work on just the rhythm. So if your team is having a hard time with this first measure in God is Love, you're not going to go all the way through the whole entrance into this entrance and then all the way through this whole phrase. We're only having problems with this measure. So what we're going to do is we're going to just work this measure. And so we want to pick up into the measure for the sake of context, but we don't need to go past the measure because we're doing just fine with have somewhere to go maybe, right? Or maybe we're having a problem with the whole phrase, whatever. You only need to work on the problem spot. So, okay, team, we're going to do this together. We're going to do this just by speaking the song in time. And so we'll get our metronome back out, right? And then you don't need to start playing your click track. You just play a metronome. 1, 2, 3. You don't just tolerate us, you don't, right? And I'm still messing up that rhythm because that actual second part of that rhythm is not super easy. So let's just go that again. I needed it to go again. So my music director says, Aaron. So, okay, thank you, music director. 1, 2, 3. You don't just tolerate us, you don't. There it is. That's a harder one. Let's do it again because once is lucky, twice is you doing it on purpose, okay? 1, 2, 3. You don't just tolerate us, you don't. There it is. Now I landed it twice in a row. Twice in a row means I can do it on purpose, right? And just do that with your team until they get it right twice in a row. You don't have to single anybody out. Maybe only one person's having a problem with the rhythm, but one person has a problem with the rhythm, everybody's going to start to get wonky on that. The other thing this is going to do that's going to be really, really, really good for you, really, really good for your team, really, really good for everyone around you, is you're going to learn your part of the music independent of the other parts of the music. So that means if someone else is messing up, but you have a click track, you have a metronome that you're using to keep on time with, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that that guy messed up and didn't do his job today or came in unprepared. Because you know what to do, you know how to do it really, really well, and you know the rhythm really, really well, and then afterwards you'll go back and we'll do some tutorials as well and some training about pitch. You know your pitch relationships, and you're going to land that plane the way it needs to land. And your team's going to land that plane the way it needs to land because you've gone over that until they understood the rhythm of what they were doing as its own piece of the puzzle. So the rhythm is a relationship between what you're singing and the tempo of the song. It's notated in these various ways with notes of values of quarter, eighth, 16th, 32nd, half whole, and rests of the same values. We have ties and we have dots to kind of change the amount of time that those things take up.